We're just on the very edge of a forest in the north of England, or a large woodland anyway, and what we can see here is some things that you might consider growing for your permaculture and perennial garden, so they need little or no maintenance. And what we've got here is some brambles, and the thing about brambles, they'll come up each year. You can cut back the old wood and let the new wood, which has got the fruiting bodies for the following year, be more abundant, or you can just leave it just to wither away naturally, and the new growth come up anyway. And very little maintenance you need. The good thing about the perennial fruits like blackberries, and you've also got red currants, black currants and gooseberries. The really good thing about them is they've got deep set roots, which means they need little or no watering at all after the first year. They'll start producing fruit from the first year you plant them, or from definitely the second year onwards. You'll get more and more fruiting on it each year, and it's just a really beneficial thing as well for insects. You're going to encourage a lot of wildlife into your garden with it, birds as well as insects and bees, so it's really good overall. The other thing as well, what you get in England is a lot of natives coming up, which are edible. So this is the sticky weed, and this one you might not think is edible when you try to eat it raw, but if you cook it up for just a few seconds, it'll get rid of those sticky spines, and it is really edible and quite nice as well. Other things to consider are things like chickweed that you might want to put in your perennial garden. Depending if you want something like ground cover like this, you think just leave it, what there is I'll eat, and depends which way you want to go with the look of your garden. I prefer more perennial kales and things like that, but I have planted some lamb's lettuce, which is native, a little bit of chickweed in one corner. I haven't got any sticky weed at the moment because it does spread out quite a lot. And the other thing I've got as well, which isn't a native, is miner's lettuce, which is winter purslane. It's also known by a couple of other names as well, but if you type it in miner's lettuce or winter purslane, it'll tell you a bit more about it. The lamb's lettuce is also known, I think, as marché, but again, check that up, and that is native to England and the British Isles. A typical scene from the edge of a British. This is a typical scene from the edge of English woodland. You'll get a lot of blackberries, raspberries, and occasional red currant, white currant, and black currants growing on the edge. And you can tell by the fact that they are growing on the edge of a woodland, or even quite a bit ways in, with plenty of tree cover, that they don't need that much sunlight to ripen. And you'll notice that with strawberries as well. I've got a north facing garden, and my strawberries will still ripen really well, even if there's not been that much sun during this summertime. And they give me lots of fruit throughout late spring right through to as late as early winter. One of the most important things for your perennial permaculture garden is to have diversity. So have plenty of different shrubs, trees, have heathers, have some wildflowers, even if they're not edible. Just add to the actual mix. If they are edible, then that's great. But if you like a particular flower and you want to put it in, that's fine. But also do your research to see what that plant can do. Even if you think it's not edible, it might have some other uses for you as well. And the more diversity you get into the garden, the more insects you're going to get, and these are like pollinating insects as well, which are going to impact on the amount of yield you have as well. So even if a flower doesn't have any benefits at all, it will have benefits to the wildlife, draw wildlife in, and you probably end up getting more crops because of this. One of the main examples, I put loads of heather in my garden. At first I thought the heather had no other use apart from attracting lots of bees in very late winter and early spring, but apparently you can make herbal teas, like a honey flavoured drink from the flowers of the heather plant, and it might have some other uses as well, but it does draw a lot of wildlife into the garden. So just an example there of what, just planted something, researched it, and ended up having another edible plant. What you don't see much in the woodland on top of the soil is grass. Now, you might get a few grasses growing in your garden once you've set up the permaculture. I won't worry about that. But if it starts to overtake, then you might need to do a bit of digging up, or alternatively lay some cardboard over it with some wood chips and other garden waste, and hopefully that'll solve the problem. Prefer not to start digging up once the permaculture is all set up, but sometimes you might need to, just for the first year or two, until you get rid of the grasses and unwanted plants. But grass is one of the few things that you don't really want. If you go into woodland, you don't often see grasses growing, especially right into the woodland, unless there's a big clearing. And they do take a lot of the nutrients out of the soil. So that's the only other advice I could give you about the grasses and setting up your garden. Again, these are some more soft fruits that you'll see around the edge of every woodland around about in England. And these are raspberries, or raspberry canes, and down there we've got the sticky weed again, or also known as gooseweed, I believe, and they're all edible as well. So get lots of soft fruit in your garden, and they'll come up year after year, and even with low levels of sunlight you'll still get some fruit bearing on these canes year after year. And this, combined with my other fruits and fruit trees, makes up most of my permaculture garden, especially my front garden. So I've got loads of red currants and black currants, gooseberries, and they need little or no attention as soon as you put them in. And just to mass produce them, just cut off the ends and stick them into the compost or soil next to it. What you do in your permaculture garden is to add some branches and twigs, pile them into a corner, and what you might encourage is some mushrooms or fungi to grow. And here we've got some Jew's ears, which happens to be an edible mushroom. Normally they're a bit more gelatinous like this, but these are starting to dry out a little bit, but it's coming up to early summer, so it is right. What you can do in your garden is add some branches and twigs, pile them up, and what you might encourage is either insects to live within inside the branch. And you can see here loads of little holes, so we've got some either woodworm or some other insects inside this. And then what we've also got is some mushrooms and fungi growing onto this particular branch. So we've got some tree mould going on down there, and we've also got some of these, which are Jew's ears growing, which are edible mushroom. And as you can see, this is what it's normally like. It's like a gelatinous mushroom, and these are drying out a little bit, the ones next to it. Most trees and shrubs in England, especially the native ones, will lose the leaves over winter, but some which aren't native to our own climate, and some which are won't lose their leaves. Now the thing about this is, if you live in a very wind-swept area and your garden's subject to getting a lot of wind blowing through it, then you want to make sure that the trees you choose are ones that lose their leaves over winter. That's when most of the heavy winds come. Right, just here in my front garden we've got a dandelion plant, and it's called dandelion because of the leaves resemble lion's teeth. So if you just look there, the flowers on it are edible, and you can dip those into batter if you want and deep fry them. depends what you want, but you can eat the flowers. If you don't want it to spread all over the garden, I suggest you do eat the flowers, or at least pick them off to stop it cell seeding everywhere. The other thing that's edible as well is the leaves, so you can have those in a salad, and depending on your soil or compost mix, you might notice that it's more bitter or less bitter depending where it's planted or where it's self-seeded. And the other thing you can do as well with the dandelion plant is blanch or restrict sunlight going to the stem, and well, the root will be restricted by sunlight anyway, and you can actually eat the root and the stem as a blanched dandelion, and it makes a lot better eating than ones where the actual stem has had sunlight touching it. And to the side of this, got some nettles growing, and nettles harvested in early spring, really good eating. So I suggest, do harvest it in early spring. If you harvest it later than mid-June, it's generally quite high in oxalic acid, and what you'll notice is that flavour's not there, and you're probably putting more harm than good into you. But if you think anything different to that, then just post your thoughts underneath. But from what I've read and my experience in the Northern Hemisphere, roughly mid-June, and I wouldn't harvest after that date. This is wild garlic again. I've done a few videos on it and mentioned it before, and basically with wild garlic it makes really good eating in early spring, and it's only really excellent eating for about 2 to 4 weeks a year. The leaves start to stiffen up, and sometimes come over pungent with the flavour sometimes, but it's more or less it's the leaves toughing up, which makes it poor eating after a certain while. But get the young leaves for 2 to 4 weeks of the year, absolutely brilliant and really good to have in a permaculture garden. Brings a lot of insects around. They don't like too much sunlight though, so you always see them on the edge or slightly in woodlands, but never right into the woodlands where it's going to be dark too much. And providing they get like maybe 2 to 3 hours sunlight a day, they'll do absolutely fine. But if you're going to put them in a south-facing garden, they're probably going to die off or not produce very well at all. A few things in the Northern Hemisphere which are ideal for a permaculture garden, and they could either be edible or used for medicinal reasons. So you got like horseradish, dock leaves or dock plant, dandelions. They're all got their uses, either edible or otherwise, or both. So just look into that, and just because you've got a weed growing in the garden, don't class it like a weed straight away. Just look at what benefits that plant has actually got, and quite often if it's actually self-seeded itself and it's in a place that it likes, just leave it there and nurture it a little bit if you want, or just leave it be and just harvest off it.